Today, we are going to visit a forgotten world. The world looks like this, with all the continents around the equator. This world is hotter than ours. There are no ice caps, and shallow seas have flooded what was previously dry land when the planet was frozen in the time 100 million years before it. In this world, we had barren landscapes on the continent, but the seas were full of life. When the world was frozen, there was only mostly microscopic life, but somehow, over the course of time, the seas became full of shellfish. This is the world of the trilobites. It is a forgotten world, veiled by the fabrics of space and time. In this world, there are many shellfish organisms in the oceans, and they never appeared until after all the continents got flooded and added a ton of minerals to the water from the standing bedrock. In this environment, we have many filter feeders, such as these brachiopods and sponge-like organisms. We have these tiny swimming filter feeders all over. The trilobites are the detritivores of the water, and the swimming arthropod, Anomalocaris, was one of the few predators. Everything is close to the seafloor. In the time period between the time of the frozen world onward to the world of the trilobites, we had a period of soft-bodied organisms that lived in microbial mats that lined the seafloor. It was only when the burrowing organisms appeared that the mats were poisoned by the oxygen it exposed them to and changed how the seafloor works. What would happen if we found this world, visited this world? What would we think of them? The organisms had eyes, but it did not have the brains to contemplate the world. All the life was in the seas, while the land was barren deserts, no matter how much it might have rained. Now we are going to visit another forgotten world. This world had a different set of continents. There was life on both land and in the seas. Unlike the first world, the world of the trilobites, this sea had more tearing. In addition to the brachiopod filter feeders, we got bryozoans that reach higher up in filter feeding. And beyond them, we get crinids, such as these sea lilies, that are like starfish that filter feed high up in the current while staking themselves to the ground with a stem. This world has many fish on it, many of them armored, and there are the armored nautiloids that serve as the top predators, and coral reefs exist in this world. On land, we have forest, but these forests are made up of very different trees than the trees we know in our world. There were also very large fungus-type organisms that were bigger than the trees on land. On this landscape, we have mites, scorpions, centipedes, and millipedes. And near the water, we have fish that have learned to come onto land and breathe the air. On this world, the trees of the forest are spreading like a plague over the pristine, barren landscape of yesterday. Along the way, they are breaking rocks and spilling minerals into the waters and subsequently the oceans. If this continues on this world at this alarming rate, it'll produce an algae bloom that'll suffocate the marine life and wipe out the coral reefs that depend on low nutrient conditions to survive. What if we were to visit this world and see the greed of certain organisms polluting the ocean on their conquest of the land? What would we think of them? Just mindless plants working to conquer the land at the expense of the marine life that lived long before it. Let us visit another world. This one looks like this. In this world, the lands are dominated by coal forest. These trees produce spark to support their heights, but there are no fungi and bacteria that can break down their bark after they die. So they just continuously build up organic matter on the forest floor, producing a peat swamp, and matter just accumulates. As a result, oxygen levels are really high in this world, and it allows giant insects to exist. Amphibians are well established near the waters, and simple reptiles occur on land. This world faces a different crisis. This crisis is global cooling from the removal of carbon from the atmosphere as peat swamps continuously leave waste. What if there was to be a massive volcanic event in the future that would release all the coal from a continental-sized area, leading to an extreme global warming event that'll cause the extinction of 90% of this world's life? Now we are going to visit a dry desert world. It was just one massive continent. It wasn't desert everywhere, but it was the dominant biome. But most of the terrestrial animals I will talk about live in the more lush conifer-dominated forest. This world has a few dinosaurs, but mostly synopsids, which are mammal-like reptiles. Originally, synopsids had sail fins, but today they have lost the need of it to control their blood temperature. In the oceans, there are crustaceans, fish, and marine reptiles that can crush shells, so nearly all the filter feeders are mobile, unlike the previous worlds in that they can burrow or float away. So many worlds with so many lessons each one had to learn. How do we know so much about these worlds? Because they are interconnected with our world. All these worlds are the worlds of the past. The next chapters are the age of dinosaurs and the age of mammals before we get to today. It took a lot of strife for our world to get balanced. You see, everybody knows about the world of the dinosaurs and the Ice Age world of the mammoths, but don't possess the big picture. The world changes, and some life from some time periods continue onward, and some disappear, and some groups suddenly spawn many new species in the fossil record. The worlds I spoke of were the Cambrian, the Devonian, the Carboniferous, and the Triassic, while also referencing the Cryogenian, the Ediacaran, and the Permian periods. What we see here is a world of organisms constantly responding to change as the flow of the continents and the habits of other organisms alter climates and redefine ecology. In the Cambrian, there wasn't a shred of intelligence to be found, just organisms and DNA constantly being shuffled around and beneficial traits slowly changing species in new conditions, until extinction events happened, and only the survivors of these events provided the DNA to fulfill the empty spots. The moving continents, the climates their positions created, and the volcanic events they produced were constantly testing the life, progressively improving it through every trial. And if a species did something that was harmful to the rest of the world, new species would adapt and take advantage of that opportunity. All up until today, when we get complex ecosystems with all this depth and diversity simply due to natural selection placing a species in every niche. If we go back to the Pleistocene before the extinctions, we will find that every continent had life like the African Serengeti, but didn't always use the same forms of life to do it, as we find unrelated animals doing the same niche in different places of the world. Isn't it ironic that the Pleistocene extinctions didn't affect Africa and South Asia, where primitive humans lived among them, but did happen in areas where more advanced humans spread the new lands? A man in the 1800s studied the fossils and the life on land today, and knew much of what was presented here. He saw this and presented a bold new idea that the world was not yet ready for. All life forms share an uncanny chemical resemblance to one another. All organisms produce proteins from essentially the same set of 20 amino acids, even though more than 70 amino acids exist in nature. All organisms use ATP as energy, and all organisms use DNA to transmit genes. All organisms use the same genetic code in their DNA. All this is no coincidence, as we are all related. People still have trouble accepting this idea, believing that we are not just another organism, but that we are special. We have a history of that, believing that the Earth was the center of the universe, and that we were the center of everything. And the people that spoke out against it, based on new evidence they saw, were condemned by the powers that be. But we are still special in that we are intelligent and we can look at all this and make sense of it all. No species before us was ever aware of its history or origins. We were always told that invisible superhumans made everything and nobody questioned it for thousands of years. But we have uncovered the answers over the past 100 years, but the world still does not want to accept or even hear about this fascinating story your planet has to tell. They feel it'll change your worldview and that they will lose the promise of immortality to accept reality. Eating from the tree of knowledge is considered wrong in their eyes. Without knowing the story, we lack perspective as to what's going on today. A greedy species is once again changing this world, but this one has the intelligence to be aware of it, but refuses to face it. We spend our time living miserably here for the prospect of a glorious future of immortality, and damn what happens to this planet. We live in this amazing planet with an incredible story, but we fail to live among the nature we came from. We don't take the time to smell the roses. We are always mortgaging our future, where we demand luxuries beyond our means but have little time to enjoy them, because everyone allows the social fabric to imprison them. The notion that one would want to live sustainably and not mortgage your decades of mortality and self-awareness is laughable in this culture, because very few people have the perspective to see what lies on the outside of the box. Should we continue this life of consuming for the sake of the economy and for the sake of asserting social dominance, we will consume the forest and release the carbon trapped in the oil and coal that formed in the world's past, and complete the sixth extinction event. It is the inability of the masses to see the big picture that allows this to happen. Science appeals to some people and spirituality appeals to others, and both forces are divorced because most spiritual people jump onto the religious bandwagon, which demands they reject our fascinating history. This divides us and allows a short-sighted, powerful people to enforce this consumeristic culture with little outcry from the public. In the end, it is up to us. We must come to understand this world around us and promote a culture of fascination with nature and not divorce ourselves from nature or the tree of knowledge. Find yourselves, and when you do and reach understanding, it'll feel like this.